Okay, so this is the Bible study for Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 through 23. And the text says, "That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told them many things in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he scattered the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, and the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell along the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Whoever has ears, let him hear." The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "Because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because you see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in their heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since they have no root, they last only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. The seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke the word, making it unfruitful. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word, understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. All right, so we've been taking a couple verses at a time, and this is a pretty big chunk. But I mean, obviously, you can see why it's a cohesive teaching and explanation. And in fact, Jesus does the explanation for us. So some of what I would usually do, we don't have to do because we can just pull it right from what Jesus says. He interprets his own parable for his disciples. So remember that you can download a PDF copy of this Bible study at www.abqnaz.org/alive, and you can follow along with us. Excuse me. So number one says, what did we talk about in our last study in Matthew 12:43 through 45? So that is when he is in the house and his mother and brothers came to get him. They wanted to talk to him. People said, your mother and brothers are outside. They couldn't get in because it was so crowded. In fact, we learned that it was so crowded in the house that the disciples couldn't even eat. And Jesus couldn't eat. And we also learned in the book of Mark, and we studied that as well, that the reason they came was to take charge of him because he was not in his right mind. So they thought he wasn't taking care of himself well, and this was unusual, abnormal, not normal behavior for a person, that he needed somebody to come and take care of him because he wasn't taking care of himself. So his response was, Who are my mother and my brothers? Which probably didn't help his case with them. He said, anybody who does the will of the Father, that's my mother and my brothers. So he reorients everybody's thinking that if our priorities are the will of the Father, then we are related. And that's what really matters. And we've probably all felt division, sort of naturally and unintended, and sometimes in a way that breaks our heart, with family members or friends who just have not accepted the will of God for their life. Um, and therefore we find ourselves at odds in terms of our life purpose, the way we look at the whole world, and we just it hurts us because we're not trying to have division, but at the same time we see, um, just like Jesus said to Peter at one point, you don't have the things of God in mind, because he was trying to save Jesus too. He said, no, I'm not going to let this happen to you. And he says, no, you're not listening to the will of God. You're trying to protect me because you desire to, but that's your will. That's not the will of God. So you don't have the things of God in mind. It wasn't even a bad thing that Peter was trying to do, not a bad thing that Jesus' mother and brothers were trying to do, but not in line with the will of God. And that's what put them at odds here. Number two, what happened next? So now we get to this text, according to 13:1 through 3a. So we start out that same day. So sometimes when we hear these stories, they're a collection of stories. We don't know what order they happened in necessarily. We don't know if the author intended us to believe that these were the same day and sort of going from place to place in this order, or whether they were arranged. In many cases in the Gospels, they were arranged for the purpose of telling sort of a story or explaining truth. And that's especially true in the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John is not written even close to chronological order. It's not even intended to. It's written sort of by topic or purpose. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are more chronological, although we see that they disagree sometimes on the order, and therefore we realize that that wasn't the primary thing. But in this case, Matthew tells us that same day this other thing happened. So Jesus went out of the house, so um, he perhaps was finished teaching, perhaps was looking for a place where a larger crowd could gather, perhaps did intend to sort of go fishing and get some food so that they could eat. We don't really know why, but we know that Jesus didn't like remain in the house, that there was a transition, a change that happened at some point in this day. B, just Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. And so maybe he was just trying to get a breath of fresh air out there. Maybe he had envisioned a way of getting some separation so that he could have some space and be in a safer, more healthy place. Perhaps they were going to fish, and that was the original plan, but the whole crowd followed them. Doesn't really tell us. Um, but it seems like Jesus perhaps was not as imbalanced as we might um, think. That the Father, in His will, did care for Jesus, as we talked about last week, and how when we do the will of the Father, He takes care of us. C, such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it while all the people stood on the shore. So I don't know what the shore looked like, whether there was sort of a cove or an inlet. I envision. So I worked at a small lake in high school and a little bit in college as a lifeguard and head lifeguard, and it was called Arrowhead Springs, and it's sort of the beach was um, round, and then the lake got deeper as you went, but there was sort of a point to the thing, and there was horseshoe shaped, I think is the best way to describe it, beach. And so I just imagine what would it would look like if the crowds gathered around on a horseshoe shaped beach and Jesus, they were pressing him and he was going to get wet one way or another because he was sitting by the lake and they crowded in around him. So he jumped in a boat. And I don't know, man, if you've ever been on a lake, particularly morning or early evening when all the boats or everything sort of disappears. Things start to get quiet, and the lake is smooth, and the voice sort of projects over the water. Um, we used to go on vacation and we would rent a houseboat and go into a cove somewhere, and it was a huge lake, and there were people in the coves across the way, and during the day you hear the sounds of boats and all sorts of other things, the sound of the world. Sometimes up in the hills you could hear the sound of traffic on a highway. But when evening came, everything sort of got quiet, and if somebody was sort of shouting at somebody on the other end of their boat, you could hear it clear across the water in your boat, for better or worse, I guess. But I think about what an amazing opportunity that was, not just to be visible to everybody that crowded around, but for them to be able to hear him. And Jesus used this natural setting, which was probably a lot easier for a large crowd to hear him even than what he was doing in that house. Um, D says, then he told them many things in parables. So that's where we're going to go from here. So actually, there are a lot of parables following this. And in this particular case, many of these parables are explained by Jesus to his disciples. So we get a chance to understand what Jesus says they mean. So number 3, how did Jesus start his parable according to 13:3 and 4? A farmer went out to sow his seed. So that's how we start. B, as he was scattering the seeds, some fell. So I think this parable has been interpreted every kind of way. Um, our modern farmers don't scatter the seed this way. Our modern farmers plow the field, make sure as much of the field as possible is good soil. Sort of prepare the soil. Sometimes they'll even put some sort of fertilizer in the soil. I grew up in farm country, so I watched it happen. I watched what they did, um, and then they would go through and plant the seeds. And if they got to a place of the field that was likely to be washed out, it's possible they might lift up the planter and stop planting seed and cross that gully, and then start planting on the other side, so that they get maximum use of seed, and don't waste seed in places that is probably not going to grow. And that's how modern farmers do it. So when we interpret this parable, many times we sort of see ourselves as ground preparers, or even ground surveyors, where we sort of uh, try to get the ground more ready. But then if it's not ready, I'm not wasting seed here. But that is not the style of farming that Jesus is describing, or that was common in that day. What was common in that day was to hold a sack of seed and to throw it out. More like when I'm sowing grass seed than when I think of a farmer. So I had of course, my parents had a push behind grass seed spreader that's a big bin with grass seed, and it spun it and basically tried to send it out as evenly as possible. Me, I live in the city in Albuquerque, so um, I had a little one like this with a crank, and it spun, and you just spread seed everywhere. So it was more like that, more like how you would spread grass seed. And grass seed, each seed is not that valuable. It comes in a bag like this, and if some of the seed falls on the path, doesn't make it, whatever. The time that it would take to get every seed right in the right place is not reasonable. It's much more feasible to just spread this seed that is so inexpensive, widely. And so that's the picture that Jesus is trying. This seed, it's valuable. Jesus is giving us, it's a valuable seed, but it's also, it doesn't cost to spread the seed. So I want us to think about that. Like, it is valuable what the message that Jesus is declaring, that we declare to the world as Jesus's messengers, but it doesn't cost us anything to spread it. And so for us to spread seed to a place, I mean, you might say, well, if we do an outreach event and we invest turkeys or whatever it costs us, if we, do advertising to get people here, it costs us. It doesn't take anything for you to walk up to somebody and spread the seed. Those are all things that we've sort of invented as ways to get the seed out more efficiently or effectively. Um, but um, but what Jesus is talking about is not about, he didn't think about what we pay for advertising or, like, good grief. He did give away food, feed 5,000 people, but it didn't cost him much because somebody donated a few loaves and a few fishes, and he multiplied it. So he wasn't worried about the cost of an outreach event. Instead, he was saying, like, look at me. I'm just going to stand on this boat and a bunch of people gather around and I'm going to spread the seed. And it doesn't cost me anything. Oh, it costs me my time, my energy. Oh, woe is me. Feel so sorry for you. So hard to be a somebody who shares the gospel, isn't it? So hard to be a Christian, called to talk about the best thing that ever happened to you. I feel so bad for you. That's my spiritual gift, sarcasm. Um, so I don't feel bad for you. In fact, if God has done something so miraculous in your life, then it should be the thing that you most want to share. So anyway, this is the picture of the sower and the seed. Now, number 4, where did the seed fall according to 13:4 through 8? As he scattered the seed, some fell along the path where the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on the rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and withered because they had no root. C, other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. And then D, still other fell on good soil where it produced a crop 160 or 30 times what was sown. So those are the 4 soils. We're going to dig deeper in that, so I'm not going to talk much more about that right now. Because number 5 says, read 13:18 through 23. Now it says, listen then to what the parable of the sower means. And I know we skipped some spots. We're going to come back to that. Don't you worry. But I want to get to the point of this parable first before we talk about why he's speaking in parables to begin with. So what do the different kinds of soil mean? Along the path, according to verse 19, says, when anyone hears the message of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away, what was sown in the heart. This is a seed sown along the path. So is the seed on the path never takes fruit. The seed on the path is snatched away before it can even get in. It's what we try to avoid on Wednesday night when you go to Bible study. Of course, on Wednesday night you go to Bible study, don't you? When you go to Bible study, and then afterwards I say, what are the questions that you still have? What are things God spoke to you? We're trying to make sure that you don't get out the door without having understood what God was trying to say to you, because the enemy is actively trying to snatch away the seed. The enemy is actively trying to distract you. The enemy is actively causing you to decide to go to the bathroom in the middle of Bible study study and spend half of the Bible study in the bathroom. You might think that that's your gut acting up. You may think that it's because you want to play video games on the toilet for half the Bible study. But all of those things, whether it's a physical reaction or whether it's an addiction that you can't get away from, the enemy is actively involved in getting you to lay your head down on the table. We need to see this as an attack of the enemy. We need to see this as the enemy's plan to snatch away the seed that God is trying to plant in your life. So you never even get the message for whatever reason. You don't get the message. You missed it. You missed half of it. You don't even understand what we were talking about. Maybe the enemy has you thinking that you already know everything. So even if you're sitting there, you're too busy thinking about what you're going to say to bring truth or help or hope to somebody else, not in a good way, but to show what you know. And you're so busy thinking about that you're not listening to what God would have you learn or hear, so you don't hear it. And we could start really talking about what it looks like for the seed to fall along the path. But the bottom line is it never takes root. For whatever reason, the enemy finds a way to steal it away so you never even really hear it, or if you hear it, you don't understand it. So that's along the path. Rocky ground, verses 20 and 21. The seed falling on rocky ground refers to someone who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. So they receive it, they hear it, they receive it. Presumably they understand it. But since they have no root, that lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, they quickly fall away. So this is somebody who is the most excited Christian that you've ever met the first week of their faith. And then they're gone. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, maybe it's even a year, but they're getting involved in everything, but then they disappear. This is what happens when there's no root, there's no depth. I'm gonna hold on going any deeper or further in that because we're going to ask a more uncomfortable question here in a moment. So I'm just going to stop there and continue on. See, among the thorns, verse 22, so it says, but since they have no, the seed falling among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of life, the deceitfulness of wealth, choke the word, making it unfruitful. So this is somebody that hears it, understands it, perhaps even wants to start to follow, but ultimately they're making a decision, and it's not like the first one where they never make the decision because honestly the enemy attacks before it even takes root, and it's not like the person that has shallow roots that it quickly springs up but then is scorched. This is the person that it falls amongst all these other things, and those other things are bigger than the seed, and so all they can think about is these other things, these thorns, these draws of life. We're going to talk about more about what that looks like. Okay, and then D, good soil, verse 23. But the seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Okay, we know what this looks like. This is the person that becomes a disciple of Jesus. This is the person who understands the cost of the life that they're choosing and decides willingly and begins to follow Christ and dig deeper, and their life multiplies. Okay, so that's obviously what we're looking for. That's what we're hoping for when we spread the seed. Um, we're hoping for it so much that our efficiency minds in modern culture and the way we do farming and our thinking causes us to think we should only spread the seed on good soil because that's the best return, which is not what Jesus says. Okay, number 6. The question is long. The answers look very, or the lines, the A, B, C, and D look very similar to the last few questions, but this question is long because I want to just clarify. I want to make sure we know what we're doing here. He says, if you have been around the church for a while, you have seen seed sown into the lives of people. And by the way, if you've been a part of a church for a while and you haven't seen seeds sown into the lives of people, you probably should find a different church, or maybe you're just not paying attention. But my guess is you're in a church that's not sowing seed. You're not sowing seed, and I really don't know what to tell you, except for there's something really wrong. If you've been in our church, you've seen some seeds sown. You probably have seen. I can give 10, 15, 20 examples at least of people you would know in each of these categories, which I'm going to be careful about. Give real world examples of each soil. I'm asking you to give examples of people that you know. Now, I'm going to be careful here. We're going to study this in small group Bible studies, and I hope that we're respectful and careful in those small group Bible studies. But those small group Bible studies offer some safety of privacy that we can learn in community. This video is going up on the internet. So I'm not going to mention names here as this video goes up on the internet, lest I say something that really hurts somebody's feelings. That's not my intention. But I'm not going to tell you in your small group Bible studies that you shouldn't mention names. I would say you should be careful about mentioning names and who's sitting there. But I would say let's talk for real. I don't want us to be so general that we don't talk for real. So I think in our small group Bible studies, hopefully we're developing a community where we as a group are trying to reach people. And because we are as a group are trying to reach people, then we as godly people who love each other and love the people where we're to whom we've spread the seed, that we can talk for real about what this means or who might fall into these categories. So I'm going to be a little more vague on this video, but I'm going to use some examples without names. I think that it might be okay for you to use names in a small group Bible study if there's community and safety within there and unity in our purpose. So I will, in parentheses here, I said we are not trying to embarrass anybody or gossip. That's not the point of this. But let's get real about the truth that Jesus taught us and talk about what it really looks like in our church. We see every one of these kinds of seeds in our church right now, in people that we are ministering to. Now, some of us may know those people so intimately that we know what's going on, and maybe the whole group doesn't, and therefore it might be a little dangerous. It might seem like gossip or talking about somebody, but that's not our intention. We do understand that the stories of our people are not finished. Here's another thing. We might say somebody is one kind of soil because of what we've seen, but their story's not finished. God hasn't given up on them. And so we're not making a final judgment by any means either. Um, but with that in mind, let's recognize what is happening for what it is. So along the path, I already, I think, gave some examples that of things that I've watched happen in Bible studies. I watch on a weekly basis people get up and go to the bathroom during the sermon or the Bible studies. People find a reason to leave the room when the gospel of Jesus Christ is being proclaimed, when the seeds are being planted. Um, and that is the enemy. I've seen um, I've seen people in the Bible study be so interested in people hearing what they have to say that they get the whole Bible study off track, so that we can't hear the message that Jesus is trying to proclaim through the lay pastor who has studied the text. And I would say this for our teachers that are watching this, that your responsibility as a teacher is to um, take authority over that Bible study. Now, I'm not telling you to be arrogant. I'm not telling you to grab the reins so that Jesus can't do anything. But I am telling you that if somebody is distracting from the message that you know God is trying to speak in the Bible study, they are an agent of the enemy. Don't let them distract from the message. Be willing to say, brother, sister, I love you, but we have a message to speak. And I don't think that is taking us in the right direction. I think you're talking about your pet truth or your pet feeling, and you're not talking about what God is trying to say here. So I've seen that. Have I seen people that absolutely couldn't, like, just couldn't accept it, and it wasn't because of somebody in the room? Yes, I'll give you an example. I was at Frontier Restaurant one day, and a guy waved me down and said, "Pastor." I had no idea who he was. And by the way, I feel bad when that's how our church is not that big that I can't know everybody, and I really try to. I try to learn the names of people, but this guy I didn't know. And he said, "You may not remember me, but several years ago I was in your church, and you were preaching on the issue of sexual immorality, and I was deep in the life of um, um, I don't know the technical term, but he was a cross dresser. He was dressing like a woman, pretending to be a woman, and he was in the church. He said, "You started talking about sexual immorality. I was a cross dresser, and my friends were homosexual, and we all got up and walked out during your message." And he said, "I'm really sorry I did that. I didn't understand, but God has spoken to me since then, and I'm trying to do the right thing." I was dumbfounded, first of all, because usually when somebody gets up and, first of all, I didn't remember, but second of all, when somebody gets up and walks out of your service, usually you think that's kind of the end of the story. But I will say that in that moment, the enemy was stealing the seed. He was so poisoned against what I was going to say that he was not willing to. Now, later on, obviously, God got to him somehow, and he remembered the what I had said. So maybe that's where the end of the story, is not written yet. But but I would just say that usually we think it's all over. But in that moment, when I was preaching, the seed was being stolen by the enemy because he was not willing or able to process it and trust that that was the word of God for him. So that's another way that looks, and that's probably, honestly, that's probably the way we usually think that looks when we talk about this. And I do want to talk about some more real situations in our lives, maybe of people that are still sitting in our Bible studies, about how they are allowing the enemy to steal the word away and may not be considering that that's what's happening. Okay, rocky ground. Rocky ground is that springs up fast, but then is choked out when the sun comes out. So this is somebody I've had. I had a young man in the church that gave his life to Christ, was delivered from drugs, and still had a long way to go in spiritual maturity, by the way. Did troubles in the marriage, immaturity and understanding, how to interact with people, still behaved like a child. But man, he was so on fire. Like he would come to Bible study, come to church, like he wanted to be a Christian rapper, and started hanging out with other Christian rappers and Christian musicians. But he said, "Pastor, I'm called to ministry." I said, "Awesome. come to Lay Pastors. At that time, this video, Lay Pastors, was a weekly Bible study that I sat with a group. And it was our primary way of raising up new believers. And honestly, the first step was just to see if they would come to a Bible study that at times was at 10 o'clock at night, at times was on a Sunday afternoon, when maybe people were wanting to be there with their family or whatever. But a step to attend a Bible study when you're already in Bible study on Sunday morning or on Wednesday night, but to attend an extra Bible study with the pastor and be faithful, and it develops consistency. Because I used to say this, I said, if you can't come every week to a Bible study with me that you're learning in, then for me to believe that you'll show up every week to a Bible study that you're teaching in, I don't believe it. You got to demonstrate consistency and faithfulness first. So, this person that I'm describing probably hung on longer than most of the people that spring up, but there was never any depth. And every attempt that I had to put him in positions where he would get some depth, he pushed away. In fact, one of the reasons I believe he started hanging out with the sort of Christian rappers and Christian musicians was because they were all a group of people that had a very shallow faith, um, but they could be in a public setting where sort of their shallow and beginner testimony was a big deal. It made them a hero. And by the way, I don't want to belittle what God had done in them in delivering them from drugs or whatever, but it was the first step in a long life of discipleship, and they thought it was kind of finished. They thought it was kind of, this is what God has to do, and this gentleman didn't let it go any deeper, and eventually was scorched out. Um, Now, again, that was sort of a slow motion one because it happened over the course of, I think, a couple of years. We've had a young lady spring up, get involved in leadership, active in ministry, want to start teaching, want to start preaching, be an active witnesser, and then wash out. Because of various sinful desires. We've had one young lady do that 4, 5, 6 times, not listen to our admonition of um, what could be if she got deeper. We would even sort of hold her back a little and say, "Hey, you're not quite ready to step into this leadership. Maybe after the first time we learned a little more. So you're not quite ready. Let's establish some depth here first." And the kind of person that I'm talking about, see, the springing up with no roots is sometimes it's a personality that people have that um, I'm ready to jump in, get involved, be the hero, be the mouthpiece, be the but I'm going to do that all without developing the behind the scenes stuff. We had a youth prayer time. In fact, we had a weekly adult prayer time, and the youth had their special event doing the spring break day camp, and they spent the week at the church, so they attended our adult prayer time. And they had a prayer time in the evening, and there was music, and there was, I don't know, they might have even had the smoke machine out or whatever. There's lighting, and there was everything, and they had the atmosphere, and they were praying out loud, and there was all kinds of excitement. And then they came the next morning and came to the adult prayer session, and us adults are a little more boring, but really, I want to develop maturity, and I was in charge of it. And so we prayed together for maybe 20 minutes, and I had different people lead out. And then I said, now I want you guys, and we did have music, and we did have the lights dimmed. I want you guys to go to the corners of the sanctuary. I want you guys to find a place separate by yourself and go to God in prayer. And I watched it as the teens one by one sort of disappeared out of the sanctuary. Some of them right away, some of them spent a little time in there, but then like, I don't know what else to say, what else to pray. So they left. And I had one of my staff members come up the next day and say, Pastor, the teens were so disappointed. And I was like, really? Why? I was kind of disappointed too, but I bet it's for a different reason. He said, well, because, you sent them to pray all by themselves. And I said, look here, if they pray in a group, but are not able to go, like when all the excitement is happening, when the music's happening, when they're willing and able to sort of concentrate and pray when somebody's like whipping them into a frenzy of excitement, but they can't go to a corner of the room and pray all by themselves. I'm not sure they know Jesus. So if anything, when we pray corporately, it should be a time when we're able to model what it looks like to pray, so that when they go to be alone, then they know how to talk to God. They know how to list their needs and consider what God might want to do. So I sent people out to the corners of the room after we prayed together, with the hope that this is sort of a step, so that then now when they go home, they pray on their own. But I guarantee you, if they can't pray in a room with other people, if they can't go over there and pray by themselves, they're not praying at home. And so the fact that they wandered away, that's disappointing to me. So we got somebody that's willing to participate in the excitement, but is not strong enough, does not have deep enough roots to be able to withstand the attacks of the enemy in the world, because the roots are that prayer time. The roots are Bible reading, devotional, the things that build us up spiritually. And it's one thing when somebody else is sort of pouring those nutrients into us, but do we know how to pull out those nutrients from the ground when we're by ourselves? And so that's an immaturity, and somebody that doesn't develop the depth in their faith that they should, and that is always a recipe for being choked out when the sun comes out. Among the thorns, I know we're taking longer than our normal Bible studies, but among the thorns, this is it's not the problem is not I didn't understand it or I didn't hear it. The problem um, is not that I accept something without counting the cost. In fact, I would say that the difference between the thorny ground and the rocky ground is that the person with the thorny ground doesn't spring up fast, because they actually do consider the cost of following Christ. The person that is the rocky ground jumps up without considering the cost, without even being willing to pay the cost, but they're hoping to have this sort of thriving life and growth without the cost, without the roots, without the things that develop maturity. But the person probably among that is the seed falling among the thorns is probably more mature as a person, but they recognize that the desires of the world they have not been willing to give up. So the person that springs up, they say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to give them up. I'm going to give them up." But then when they come, they didn't give them up. So they weren't. There was no depth, no ability to withstand that temptation. The person that is the among the thorns ground is they never take root, because even when the seed falls, they're looking around at the pull of the world, wealth, sexual promiscuity and pleasure, and they're saying, I get what this is, but I can't pursue this because what I really want is this. And I would say for a good part of my life, that's what I was. Um, I knew God was calling me. I heard the message. I don't know that I had the fullness of the Spirit. I don't think so. I don't think I understood fully what it meant. But I understood what God was calling me to. I think I understood. I didn't want that. I wanted money. I wanted women. I wanted whatever I could get other than that. And so I understand this ground because that's the ground I was for most of my life. I understand the rocky ground because I've seen it among so many people in our church. It seems so common. Um, then obviously the good soil. Um, we've had people come and go in our church. Um, but I think about what God is doing in Pastor James's life. I think about what God's doing in Rebecca's life. I'm using names now. I think about what God is doing um, in Cynthia's life. I think about what God is doing in Faila's life. I think about what God's doing. Uh, I see people who've committed their life to Christ. And I know the story is not, I know, Pastor James, if he was telling this story, would tell you that for most of his life, he was a different kind of soil too. But the day that I met him, the day that he came to our church and the seed was sown, I feel like he was a different kind of soil than he had been in the past, and he was good soil, and that is borne out in the discipleship and multiplication that's happening. It's borne out in the fact that he is not only faithful in following God, but he's leading his children to follow God, and he's discipling people in the church to follow God. And we see the 30, 60, and 100 fold. um, I wish I could list more people confidently. There's other people I could certainly list. Um, but I'm not sure how confident I see um, producing fruit. And so I worry that the jury's still out on what kind of soil you've been. Um, but I can testify to certain people that I know that they've given their life to Christ, and you see fruit, you see multiplication, you see other people coming to Christ, you see seeds being sown. See, that's the thing about a plant that bears fruit, is the fruit carries with it seeds, and those seeds take root in similar soil when that plant becomes fruitful. Um, so I heard a testimony from a Bible study class this past week um, that was shared with me by somebody in that class, and they said, well, this person was sharing that in the past they made the wrong decisions with regard to their priorities in life and things like that, and they did not see the fruit that we were talking about in that. And I thought, even though that's a confession of maybe not being the right soil, maybe not listening to God in that time, the fact that the confession is being made was a declaration that I want to be now a different kind of person, which tells me that there may be some good soil there that the seed is falling into. And I won't share that name, and I know that the story is not over, but I believe that the seed has fallen on good soil there, and I believe that there's going to be 30, 60, or 100 fold. Um, yeah. We've had people get local ministers' licenses that disappeared the next day. We've had people elected to the board that by the end of their board term were barely attending church. Those are rocky ground type of things for sure. Um, we've got some good soil too. Number 7, what does What do verses 9 through 17 mean? A, Jesus is trying to hide things from people, so only special people get into the kingdom. That is not true. That is obviously not true. In fact, he wouldn't have told the parable of sowing the seed like this if that was true. B, this parable is for the people in the kingdom and is about the people who are being invited in. It could be offensive to those who are outside and those who may be just coming in. It is a parable for shepherds or sowers. So, in other words, he tells it in a parable because there are people that don't know, that haven't accepted the seed yet. They don't know what kind of soil they are, and nobody else does either. And it's not a parable for them. It's not a parable for how, like, make yourself the right kind of soil. It's a parable for the sowers, who the disciples who he is raising up to be apostles, to send out to get ready for ministry. He's trying to tell them that the people, when we sow the seed, there's a whole big crowd here. Not all of them are 30, 60, 100-fold soil. The problem of church communication is significant. And I'll say this, like this can be something that, like, philosophy of ministry or teach you about church. But the challenge of when we communicate something to our church, here's a question. Are we communicating it to ministers who are going to use it to minister to the community, or are we communicating it to the community? So a church where the people in the church are largely is ingrown, it's closed off, and the same people have been there for 50 years, then the pastor will get up and announce to the whole church that there's going to be a board meeting, which only affects 5 or 10 people. But that's the most exciting and important thing going on in that church, so that's the announcement that's made. So the announcements become made for a particular few leaders because the people that are in the church are pretty much the particular few leaders that have been there forever. When a church becomes outward focused like ours, then we start announcing events, outreach events, things like that. We start announcing things that we hope will pull people in. We announce a women's ministry function that we hope not just leaders show up to, but some new people to our church show up to and get connected with some of our leaders and disciplers and more mature believers. So our communication, our announcements become for the general public, anybody that's visiting today. But then at some point, for instance, we would announce our outreach events when we're giving out cars or we're giving out backpacks or turkeys or whatever. And we started announcing them. But then we'd have people come and show up and sign up. They're members of the church, but they're signing up for the car. And then we're like, oh, you're supposed to be part of the team that ministers to the community, not the one signing up for the car. You missed the car is to pull in the community, the lost people that don't know Jesus. You're the worker. So our communication in public settings, whether it's on Facebook or on our GroupMe where we have a community GroupMe, or whether it's on our video during the service where visitors are listening along with our staff, and everybody in between, our communication has this complexity that we have to decide, is our primary purpose to communicate to new people to the church, or is our primary purpose to communicate to the ministers of the church, the leaders, and all of us know that our hope is all of the members become leaders and all of the new people become members who become leaders, and we're trying to pull them all in. But if we're communicating all of it to everybody, then it becomes complex how we communicate. So we have to say, we're inviting the community in, so you now have to qualify yourself. Are you community or are you the we? We, Sandia Church, is inviting our community in for this event. Now, there's a lot of people that should be the we that hear that and say, I'm the community, and come in and sign up. And we tend to qualify ourselves, honestly. And then our job as disciplers, as leaders, as members, as mature believers in the church is, so how do we get the people who still see themselves as the community to see themselves as the we? And that actually doesn't happen best in the announcements. It happens best in one-on-one discipleship or small group discipleship. So this is, from my perspective, a philosophy of ministry question and something that we have to consider. And it's the reason we don't announce everything in public forums, or we don't put everything in the video announcements. Um, we tend to create our video announcements in a way that our assumption is, even if you're brand new to our church, we're calling you into the we. So join us in welcoming our community. And then we make a flyer that we distribute on Facebook or someplace outside that welcomes in the community. In our schools or whatever, and we try to do that. Now, I'll say all that to say this is what Jesus was doing with this parable. He spoke a parable to some people in the crowd about the other people in the crowd. That's the best answer to this question. That's the best answer to what Jesus was trying to do. If you understand this, you're the we. If you understand that, your heart has been transformed. So C says, you can't come to Christ by learning good teachings. You come to Christ by heart awakening. The teachings are for people whose heart has been awakened. So once your heart has been awakened, then you are listening with the ears of like that have been opened by God, that there's a filter that is a God filter on what you hear. And if your heart has been awakened, you hear things as the we. And so he's saying, I'm not speaking to the community, I'm speaking to we. We are sharing a message with the community. And if you understood this parable, you're the we that's with me sharing the message to this community. And I'm telling you something about the community right in front of them that they don't understand, but you do. And that's really what he's doing. So he's got this huge crowd. Some of them are disciples, not just the 12, but people who have really had their hearts opened up to the message of God and what God would have them do, and what God would do in their lives. Those are the people that the parable is for. The other people are demonstration. So he's saying, I'm sharing the message of salvation with you. I'm sharing the message of the kingdom. That's the seed. There are all sorts of different soils. His disciples say, why are you talking like that? Because you understand, but the soil doesn't. I'm talking about them. They don't even realize it. They're like, man, soil, yeah, stuff. That's crazy. Yeah. I wonder what that means. I wonder what that looks like. And if you're a disciple whose heart's been awakened, you're saying, man, it's right. Look at this. Look at that person that's distracted. Look at that person that's weighing the cost. Look at that person that's so excited. They're ready to do anything. And they come to Jesus and like, I'll follow you anywhere. But first let me. Yeah, that's a different kind of soil. That's not the fruit-bearing soil. So those people are all around, and he's talking to the people whose hearts have been awakened and saying, look around you. This is what the kingdom of heaven is like. The sower sows the seed. And so there's people like, man, this is crazy stuff. Let me take that note. I don't have a clue what that means. And there's other people that are like, wow, I see it. Look at this soil. Look at here, that soil. But he said it to everybody. There's people in this Bible study. They're going to be like, man, that's crazy stuff. I don't know who he's talking about. Like he just told a bunch of stories without using names. I don't know people like that. And there's people sitting next to you that are saying, "This person next to me is that person." See what they're doing. That's what Jesus is doing. That's what this parable is about. That's why Jesus speaks in parables. Man, I'm sorry this has been an hour Bible study. I'm not sorry, not sorry. This is good stuff. I hope you can get through it in the time that we have when you're teaching it. But I've been so excited to teach it, so it's taken me a long time. So God bless you. I love you. See you.